We are live. I haven't been live in a while. So, what's up to those of you who still follow this blog? Appreciate you. Appreciate your patience as I'm out there lifing, right? It is hotter than the devil's underwear. And for those of you who missed this random live stream, you guys know I'm random. You can catch it on the replay. Catch it on the replay. I am pretty sure that this content is going to be suppressed because I know that the Satanist wants the world manipulated. And unfortunately, they have control over how we communicate with each other, what we say to each other. We're pretty intertwined in their information channels. All right. So I know that the Satanists on YouTube, the Mossad, the Synagogue of Satan folks, right? They are going to be suppressing this live stream. So again, if they will allow it, it will be on my replay tab under the live streams tab. So I like to check out. I think that, if you get too intertwined in Satan's world, you will find yourself just in just mental disarray constantly because there's very little that the average or normal person would have real control over. And I do have on a tube top. Again, it's hotter than the devil's underwear out here. And so, less is more these days. But when I check into Satan's world, it's like I'm just like, oh, this is what's going on now, right? And a lot of people are talking about Trump, U.S., moving on Iran, and a lot of people are like, this is going to start World War III, and this is going to not be good for any of the nations globally, and it won't be. It will not be because, when you think about it, the United States, hi, Sam, how are you? When you think about the United States never goes to war with just one nation. It's not just one nation that they go to war with. Usually they're going to war with an axis of power at this point. At this point, the United States, and I've said this before, it does not have punking power. There have been several nations globally that have learned how to de-dollarize. If United States can throw a whole bunch of sanctions on their asses, right? And because they've de-dollarized, because they've learned how to hedge their economies against the United States sanctions, we can tout sanctions until the cows come home for some of these Eastern nations, Middle Eastern nations, and it's not gonna really, they're not gonna bat an eye. And so when we're talking about, Trump's war on Iran, right, we got to think about it as though Iran is not just Iran anymore, okay? Iran is a BRICS nation. And if anybody knows anything about NATO, right, because you got your NATO nations, right? If you attack one, you attack all of them. It's the motto of NATO. We're friends. And if you hurt one of our friends, you're going to hurt us all, right? That's kind of how the BRICS nations are setting themselves up, where they're not just an economic conglomerate hedging against the dollar, they're also a military power as well. And people can say, well, I would never bet against the United States military. Okay, that's fine. But when you have a military and global militaries who are strategically positioning themselves as well, it doesn't really look good for the United States. And a lot of this, like I said, these are the affairs of men in Satan's world, right? And I don't really concern myself big time with this. But then when people start to justify the affairs of men in Satan's world with the Bible, that is when my red flags start going up. Because there's so many people that don't even know the damn Bible well enough to be even on the bandwagons of ignorances that they're on. And Ted Cruz is one of them. Ted Cruz is one of them. So we're going to listen to Ted Cruz talk to Tucker Carlson, and then we're going to just kind of break down some of the things that Ted is saying that he's been misinformed about, because again, he's coming from a religious organization thinking. So these people don't know the Bible. They know what they're being told about the Bible. If your preacher saying we should support Israel, right? Then in your mind, the preacher, he's ordained by God, he's going to tell me the truth. And a lot of these pastors and preachers, they are sellouts. They are apostates. And so you have a lot of apostates that are leading people. First of all, it should be very, very clear. No matter what the manipulations and lies of the Zionists are, Israel in the Bible is not a land. Israel in the Bible is not a land. It's not even a government people. It is a people belonging to Yahuwah or Yahweh, who were selected among the nations to live differently and in covenant with their God. And unfortunately, the ancient Israelites did not do a good job at that. That's why Black people, and y'all worshiping your ancestors, they betrayed us. They cursed us, right? And now we have this people called Jews who have literally hijacked our identity, right? And now they have manipulated the world into believing that they are God's chosen people, that their Slavic, Germanic, Scandinavian asses should actually be in a region that is Africa. Israel is in Africa. We didn't even know nothing about no concept of a Middle East until the early 1900s. So if people really understood that region and the history of it, they would know that Israel that we know today is in Africa. There is no such thing as the Middle East. But off of that, right? When you look at the succession and timeline of the Bible is very chronological. The Bible is very chronological. So when the Bible, when Yahuwah, or Yahweh for those, when Yahuwah was like, you are my people, you are my nation. Any nation that goes against you, they will be going against me. He was talking about a people, not that unholy land that the United States is getting ready to risk all of our lives and livelihoods for, to try to preserve. Okay? Ancient Israelites are Black. They are not white, Germanic people. And that is why the number one issue in Israel right now is skin cancer for the imposters. Because they should not be there. Now this nation is going to war for a bunch of imposters. And I blame the Catholic Church. I blame a lot of these churches because they enabled this lie for so damn long. Jews are not God's chosen people. We never even knew about a Jew until the Babylon exile. A notion of a Jew did not come out until the 70-year exile. And while they were in Babylon, the Hebrews, and that's why you will never find a book of Jews in any of the 66 canonicals, because they were Hebrews. They were not Jews. Jews is an extension of the Hebrew faith. Nowhere in the Bible are you going to hear Yeshua HaMashiach or the Roman Jesus refer to himself as a Jew. The only apostle that referred to himself as a Jew was Paul. Why? Because Paul actually practiced Judaism. He was a Pharisee. He was a Pharisee. None of the other apostles were Pharisees. Pharisees are rabbis. They practice Judaism. And this is why Paul is the only one of Jesus' apostles, or Yeshua's apostles, that referred to himself as a Jew. Okay, so you got to understand who people are, the evolution of people, and what the Bible is saying, because Hebrews were exiled to Babylon. but Hebrews and Jews returned to that land. By the time of Jesus's birth or Yeshua's birth, it was colonized. It was colonized. It was colonized by people who were not those people. But let's hear what Ted Cruz is saying, because a lot of people believe this little lie that he's spitting. They don't even know the biblical foundation for what they believe. They just saying shit and believing shit.
My perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, says the nation of Israel. So
okay, and so let's talk about that particular line. And you got to understand the chronology of the Bible, okay? You got to understand the chronology of the Bible. When you understand what happened to the ancient Israelites, how they ended up being scattered, a lot of that was their own damn fault, because they only had 10 commandments to follow, and the one was not worship other gods. And they were doing that all day once the northern kingdom of Israel, because again, you have two separate kingdoms here. You have the northern kingdom of Israel, which Jesus was born in Galilee. He was born on the north side, right? And then you have Judea, Jerusalem, okay? Which is the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. They pretty much held down that kingdom until the Babylonian exile. Hebrews were exiled to Babylon. What came out were Hebrews and Jews. Why? Because you had Hebrews who decided to make their own religion. They felt like they were not under the governance of their God, being exiled in Babylon, because they were looking at it like they were upset that their God punished them by letting the Babylonians move on them, right? So a lot of those Hebrews ended up creating a religion that we know as Judaism. And the Talmud is pretty much their governance of that. It's like they don't even follow Deuteronomy all the way. They don't even understand their history before Deuteronomy or after it. But off of that, when we're talking about these chosen people that want to convince the entire world that we should risk our nation's lives, livelihoods of our people to protect them and their lie, it becomes very absurd. And you have these politicians who are using religion, false religion, apostate religion, to justify going into war, moving on whole nations. And this is why people really need to break away from these organized religions and get into the damn word of God yourself. Because a lot of these people are being manipulated into believing that a certain type of people and an unholy land is something that the world should be protecting. And that is just sad to me. That is just sad to me. God's chosen people are Israel. Israel is a people in the Bible. It is not a land, especially not that unholy land. And I did a whole video about why that land is unholy. If you want to be real technical about it, we can go beyond Yeshua, the Messiah, that the Jews were out there killing those that called themselves Jews. This is even why in Revelation and in John, you will hear the apostles say those who called themselves Jews, because they were separating themselves as Hebrews from those who called themselves Jews. So Ted Cruz is out here.
Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
And it's sad that these Christians are out here, these Zionists, these Satanists. They are pretty much from the synagogue of Satan, because they are being led by apostates who are influenced by the synagogue of Satan. So
I can find it to you. I don't have the
he don't even know. You got a whole founded belief on why you should protect this nation, who's out here just doing anything the fuck they want to the neighboring nations or whatever. In the United States, right, we're playing along, and I'll get into that too.
Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, says the nation of Israel.
No, it does not say the nation of Israel. God is specifically talking about his people, who were the Hebrews, the Israelites, not an Israeli, not some new concoction of who his people are that started in 1948, that the churches and all the white supremacists wanted to concoct so that they can uphold some idealism. I mean, it's just not. Israel is a people in the Bible, not a nation, not a governance, not a land, especially a government ran by imperfect people, and a government ran by a person like Benjamin Netanyahu. You really want to believe that God wants to protect that bullshit over there? It's fucking sad.
So that's in the Bible.
And shame on those people who keep on upholding these damn lies, because it's never going to go well for you. It's never going to go well for you, because if you want to get technical, Israel, what we know today, is a mockery of the scriptures. It is a mockery of the scriptures. And you know what happens when you mock the scriptures? You get the same exact outcome that happened in the scriptures, but worse. So while y'all talking about Russia, there's a very legitimate reason why a lot of nations should be scared of Russia, because I truly do believe that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the true Israelites, they're going to use Russia to move on a lot of these nations. And so it's not just Iran, because again, Iran, they're BRICS. They're part of a conglomerate. So we're not just getting busy with Iran, we're getting busy with all of those other BRICS nations. So Trump is definitely, to me, on a mission to collapse this nation. He's definitely on a mission to solidify not the United States' power and influence in this world, but Israel's. And there's a reason why the United States and Israel, from a biblical perspective, from a Bible prophecy perspective, why they will always be in union. And I've said this before, and I've said this, and I'll say it until the cows come home. We are the judgment generations. I know we're the judgment generations because of how the prophecies are playing out. The second beast had 2 horns. And horns in Bible prophecy represent nations. They did not have any crowns. And Daniel tells us that the bigger horn grows up later. When you think about horns in Bible prophecy, you're talking about nations that have global dominance on the world. They have global influence in large territories in some kind of way. So we're talking Babylonian Empire. We're talking about Medo-Persian Empire. We're talking about the Grecian Empire. We're talking about the Roman Empire, right? These all had world dominance. Babylon at its height was 19 million square miles of conquering, right? So horns in Bible prophecy speak are nations, okay? We already know who the first beast represent. It represents all of those nations that kind of rose from the bastard Roman Empire. So all those bastard nations that rose from the Roman Empire, they are the first beast, because we know the first beast in the Revelation had crowns. It was monarchical. They were monarchical nations. And it said 3 of those nations were plucked out, and they absolutely were, because Vatican City took them out. So those nations that remain that we know today from that first beast: France, Italy, Great Britain, Spain, Germany. These are fragmented nations from the Roman Empire. They are the first beast. They were all monarchical. But the second beast is said, when John said, even Daniel said it, I saw a second beast. So he saw another beast that was dominating the world. Daniel says the first beast, or the larger horn on that beast, it grows up later. And America is the only nation in mankind's history up into these points that grew up later, that has world dominance. But that little horn, it always existed. because the nations took Israel out of desolation. That is what they did. They have been planning to take Israel out of desolation since at least the 1800s. So this 1948 thing, this is not something that just came up. They, oh, let's just, no, they have been planning this shit for centuries. For centuries. So they brought Israel out of desolation. So we know that the United States and Israel, they're going to be in union. They will conquer together. These nations will fall together. And when you look at the state of the second beast is weak, economically collapsed. The United States dollar is on a lifeline. So we only have one other option to kind of mitigate any of this, and this is war. It's going to be global war because somebody's going to be vying for the world power, especially when the dollar collapses. And the reason why we're going to war right now is because our dollar is collapsing. We've had all of these shitty people in our governments, self-interest people, and they have brought us to this point of economic collapse. And so you can look at this from a secular view, take the religion out of it. The second beast is falling. They are at a very volatile state. The United States do not have punking power anymore. It just doesn't. It does not. Too many nations are nuclear now. Too many nations have learned to hedge against our dollar. This is not a world power anymore. It's not a world power. And the only way that we're going to be able to maintain sovereignty is to go to war with another nation. Now, on the flip side, and I know this is going to sound messed up to a lot of people, this nation is not going to fall because this is Satan's nation. This is where Satan dwells. And so he's not going to literally let this nation fall like that. We will be the last one standing until Judgment Day. It will be United States and Israel fucking up the world until Judgment Day, in my personal opinion, the way that these prophecies, these nations, these people are playing out. That is my conclusion at this point. But anyways, let me get into the comments, and big ups to all of the people that usually follow my content. I'm sorry I haven't done live streaming in a while. You guys know that I just, I moved into my house about a month ago. I have been in my garden. My vegetables are flowering. So I've just been frolicking. With God's nature. I've had my hands in nature growing, because I'm more like, I know what is in my control, giving these damn plants some nutrient boosters, okay, and praying that God give me some more rain to harvest so I can keep watering their asses on these hot ass days. But y'all let me know what y'all think. Let's go ahead and listen to Ted some more with his little lying, confused ass.
I don't have the scripture off the tip of my. You pull out the phone and use the.
It's in Genesis, but.
So he's quoting his scripture in Genesis, okay? It's very important for people to understand the chronology of the Bible, okay? Because, when you get to Deuteronomy, for example, right? Genesis to Deuteronomy, right? Israelites are not even in the promised land in Deuteronomy. They're not. In fact, Joshua is the one who leads them into the promised land, right? They are still at the point of getting into they have to conquer all these nations. So when we get to the point of Joshua, right, this is where we see them conquering all of the nations and cleaning out that area so that it's holy. Because again, a lot of those nations practice a lot of demonic things. They worship demonic gods, kid sacrifice. They weren't even doing good animal sacrifices. They were committing bestiality with these animals, and so their job was to clean up the promised land, get all those disgusting things out of the nations, right? They did not finish the job. Matter of fact, they not only did they not finish the job, they started nation mixing. And that started with the Northern Kingdom. They started nation mixing. And then as a result of that, they were worshiping, conforming to the idealisms and the behaviors of the nations, right? Remember, God's people, Israel, in the Bible, they were supposed to be separate from the world. They were supposed to be separate from the nations. They were not to be intertwined in the affairs of the nations. And so that alone should let people know that this notion of Israel today is bullshit. Because if we really understand with the ancient Israelites, God mandated them, there's no fucking way anybody would believe that that unholy land is a place that God's actual people exodus to. And it's sad that so many people believe the bullshit. But again, Satan's chosen people do rule the world. And so, of course, this lie is going to be maintained in the service of Satan's chosen people. And he chose them back in Babylon. Just understand the succession of that history. These people God chose back in Babylon. They were chosen because they were already in their feelings that their God exiled them from the promised land. Remember, the Assyrians and the Babylonians, those were the judgments for the ancient Israelites. And the Romans came in and finished the job because that place was unholy. The Romans came in and finished the job. And those were all the judgments for those people who claimed that they were God's people. So let's just kind of look at things for like we start at the Bible in Joshua. The ancient Israelites subdued every single nation. They conquered them, no problem. And again, you look at the walls of Jericho. It was a very passive tactical strategy. They marched around the city for 7 days. And on the 7th day, they blew trumpets. The wall was down. They were able to subdue those people. So you're looking at the track record of the ancient Israelites and they're conquering. And it's like, well, damn, they were unconquerable up until the point that they started betraying their God. One no other nation messing with the ancient Israelites up until the point that they started betraying their God, worshiping other gods. And so what did their God say? Well, you know, let's see if these other gods are going to protect you from the Assyrians and the Babylonians who are trying to move on you. And they were, and obviously they did not, because the northern kingdom of Israel was wiped out first by the Assyrians. And then the Babylonians came in and took out the southern kingdom. Now we're going to fast forward to their people returning home, returning to their homeland. That happened. That happened already. See, people are sitting up here conflating shit in the Bible. And if you look at it from a chronological standpoint, the ancient Israelites did exodus back home from Babylonian exile. They absolutely did return back to their home. Some of them, not all of them, right? They did return. And who helped them return? The Persians. I mean, if you look at the biblical history and the secular history, there's no fucking way people are running around with these lies. There's no way. Cyrus the Mede helped the ancient Israelites return to their home. They already went back to their home after Babylonian exile. And what did they do when they got back to their home? They managed to fuck up shit again, betraying their God. And now what got them was the Grecian culture. The Greek gods got their asses. So this is where you go into the War of the Maccabees, right? Because you had an ideological difference between the ancient Hebrews and these people that called themselves Jews. So there was an ideological difference all the way. By the time we get to the Roman Empire and we get to Herod the Great, Herod was not a Jew. He was a convert. He converted to Judaism, but he was not an Israelite. He was not a Middle Easterner. Herod the Great was a Roman implant in Judea. Matter of fact, by the time the Romans started conquering those lands, the Pharisees were compromised, the scribes were compromised, the Sanhedrins were compromised. All of those people that started creating their Judaism laws, they were all compromised to the Romans. This is why they were able to deliver Yeshua, a Hebrew, to the Romans, because they were in bed with them. They were in bed with them. So when you think about who actually killed the Messiah or the promised seed, it was both those who called themselves Jews, and that's not anti-Semitic to just tell the damn truth, organizing with Romans. The Romans were the executors, right? But the instigators were those who called themselves Jews. The Romans did not want to have anything to do with Yeshua because nothing that the Jews were putting on the table made sense to breaking Roman law. This is why Pontius Pilate did not want to have anything to do with him, because they understood that this is a holy man. He hasn't done anything to break Roman law. He's broken your man-made Judaism laws because you don't want to lose power because the Son of Man came. The promised seed came, the seed of David, and he was black. He was black. He was black. And I think the first step to the world understanding the bullshit that we know as Israel is to understand that the ancient Israelites were not Anglos. They were not Scandinavian descendants. They were not. They were not. There was a bloodline, a specific bloodline that even was preserved during the Babylonian Empire. That bloodline of David was preserved, no matter how much all them other ancient Israelites were fucking up, right? God still saw fit to preserve the bloodline of David, and he did. And again, the bloodline of David is not no white-skinned person. And again, if you knew the Bible, you would know this, okay? There's no fucking way that the Egyptians enslaved Anglo-looking people for 400 damn years, right? The sun would have killed their asses before the Egyptians would have got to their asses. There's a reason why Joseph, who was sold to Egypt by his brothers, why years later, when Joseph was older, right? Because he ended up, this is what the whole Prince of Egypt concept, story is about. His brothers couldn't recognize him because ancient Egyptians are black. So I think, people will really start to understand the Bible when they stop believing all the whitewashed bullshit of the Bible. And this is not about supremacy or anything. It's just about fact. Okay? Anglos do not stem from that region. They have conquered those regions. They have imperialized, migrated, whatever you want to say, but they are not cut from those regions. They're not cut from Africa. And Israel is in Africa. Okay? So Ted Cruz, along with the other Christian Zionists, obviously they are Satanists. These are Satan's chosen people skewing the Bible to meet their idealism of supremacy. And that supremacy is, let's enable these Scandinavian, Slavic, Germanic people to continue to claim that they should have a stake in a region that they don't belong in. And then let's fuck up the whole world in service of this lie. That's basically what is happening right now and has been happening. You've had so many nations compromised, attacked in the name of preserving, protecting a notion of a people that is a lie. And again, you guys do the research. What is the number one issue in Israel? Skin cancer. Skin cancer. God don't like ugly. He don't like lies. They got to look at sunscreen. At the micro level, you're going to find melanin, right? Because black people should be in those regions. Melanated people should be in those regions, not Anglo, Germanic, Polish, Slavic people. They don't belong there. And so God is always going to show them why they don't belong there. And so there's that. But poor Ted Cruz lying to his fellow.
A Bible phrase you don't have context for, and you don't know where in the Bible it is.
Right. Tucker's like, you quoted
That's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the...
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase you don't have context for, and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused.
How Texas fans...
You know, you got to understand how the notion of the Gentiles really came in, right? And a lot of it was because the people that God chose, they betrayed their God. Now, he never turned his back on his people, because even in Romans 11, he says they are the original branches. His people, the descendants of his people, are still the original branches. But because they betrayed their God, turned their back, he said, I'm going to build a mightier nation of my people using the Gentiles as well. And this is where you really do get the New Testament. The New Testament is not a covenant with God's people only. It was a covenant with both those Hebrews and those Gentile individuals who wanted to conform to the laws and standards of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yahuwah. All right? A lot of people don't even know God's name, talking about let's go to war over some bullshit.
I want to know what you're talking about.
Hey, where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel.
Not true. That is not true.
No. Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And
what does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what? Hold on.
Okay, these guys are skewing the scriptures. Okay, I want people to really understand. This is why you got to dive into the Bible yourself and stop letting these apostates dictate to you what the Bible is saying. Because what he is saying is not true. It's not true. And again, we're talking about a conversation, a protection that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob gave his people who were entering the promised land. But if you really read the full book of Deuteronomy, there were conditions. And their God even said, just as though I've given you this land, I can remove you from this land. And that's exactly what it did. They kept sinning, kept nation mixing, kept worshiping other gods. He went and he got his court-appointed Assyrians to knock out the northern kingdom. And then he got his court-appointed Babylonians to knock out the southern kingdom. Then when they got back to their land and still kept fucking up, because now when you get to, when they returned to the land, you had some of those people even killing God's prophets. King Hezekiah killed Isaiah. So now you got these people cutting loose again, and now they're killing God's prophets. All right? And they kept on with that bullshit. And what did God do to the ancient Israelites? He sent his court-appointed Romans to give them the business. And this is why the Romans, they were so pissed off, because obviously they were warring with these people. They were trying to preserve this idea of their land that was not holy. They subdued them. And Hadrian named the entire region Palestina. So the region was never called Israel to begin with. You had one kingdom that was called Israel. And then you had Judah or Judea. Okay? When the Romans finally subdued the war in Jerusalem and Rome, and they subdued Jerusalem, Hadrian renamed that region Palestina. The entire region was Palestina. All right? So if you got to know the secular history to really understand the ancient texts in the scrolls of remembrance, or as many refer to it as the Bible. Once you really understand the secular history and what the scrolls of remembrance are saying, you will understand that what Ted Cruz is saying is a bunch of Zionist bullshit.
Hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis...
So in his definition of Israel, he is referring to Israel as a land, not a people.
That's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel. Yes.
No, he's not. He's talking. Israel is God's people.
He's talking about the political entity called Israel.
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yet nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the
God's
descendants of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes,
it is.
Such a lie.
And I'm really happy he said that, because when you hear it, you realize how ridiculous
This is Candace
it sounds.
Owens, and
Even
shout
if
out
you're
to
not
We
following
Woke
the
Now.
theology, if you don't identify as a Christian, you realize that you have a senator that is sitting across saying that his number one reason, he didn't say one of the reasons, he said my number one reason that I support Israel is because the Bible commands me to do so. And just so you know, the Bible does not command, and this is what Tucker
Not at
Carlson
all.
is getting to in that clip.
It doesn't.
It does not command you to
It doesn't.
support the modern state of Israel.
Not at all.
That Genesis is
As a matter of fact, the Bible never even commanded the nations to support Israel. Matter of fact, the Bible is really saying, and this is again, God's chosen nation when they were actually in favor. He was basically saying, if these nations do not, because the purpose of the people of Israel were to be an example to the nations. They failed. They totally failed doing that because they kept trying to be like the nations, which led to their judgments, right? But even still, the other nations were not to be bowing to Israel, the people of Israel, the land of Israel, right? The only thing that the other nations and what was being said in Genesis is that they're not going to be able to move on you. I will be protecting you. And they saw that protection as they went into the promised land. And again, you read the scriptures, the people of Israel, they did not start getting conquered until they got out of covenant with their God. That is what happened to them. Those were their judgments. Because even when I hear some Jewish people say, well, the Romans, it's like, those are your judgments. If you believe, if you even know what you're talking about, right? Those are judgments upon the ancient Hebrew Israelite people, not Israelis, not Jews. They were judgments upon Hebrews. And again, you'll never find a book of Jews because the notion of a Jew came out of Babylon. The people of the Bible are Hebrews. This is why there is a book of Hebrews, not a book of Jews. And Hebrews are not Slavic, Germanic, Polish descent people. They are Africans. So I feel bad for, so-called Christians and what they are on the bandwagon of ignorant with. And it is a bandwagon of ignorance, but I do believe that Satan's world is playing out the way that it needs to play out. And I do believe that we are the judgment generations. And I feel that once we see that collapse of the second beast, which represents the United States and Israel, we're going to see judgment time. We are going to see Armageddon. We are going to start seeing things escalate on this earth. And it's not just going to hit one nation, right? Sometimes we're sitting back comfortably in our mode, right? And we're looking at the people in Gaza, right? And they are being devastated by those demons, right? And we sit back in our comfortable element, not realizing that Gaza is going to be people in this nation one day. Gaza will be people in this nation one day. It will. Gaza is going to be a lot of nations around the world. Because once you start busting nukes, which I do believe that nuclear war is in the equation in our future, once you start doing that, you start fucking up the earth, you start vegetation, and you really start creating, scarcity elements. And we are playing with fire in the service of this idea of Israel. And I just pray for everybody. If you are somebody who's actively seeking Yahuwah or Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I pray that you remove yourself from the apostasy that is going on. You should not be supporting war. God's people do not support war. We do not engage in war. We don't promote it or support it. God's true people do not do things like that. So, when you're talking about supporting Israel, you got to ask yourself, truly, are those truly God's people? Are they truly God's people in that region? Are they truly God's people in that region? I would say genetically, no. They are not God's people in that region. Spiritually, no, they are not God's people. Even down to a theological intelligence, they're not. If they are running on a damn lie that is actually getting a lot of their people skin cancer. But anyways, y'all, let me go and look at the comments, and then I got to check out. I want to go back outside and frolic with my plants in the hot ass weather. I got to douse myself with some water first. But I haven't done a live stream in a while. I just wanted to chime in, talk about that, because it just really irks me. It irks my soul when I hear these so-called Christians talking about they're supporting Israel because of some bold bullshit. It's just ridiculous. One became the other became heir. No, we ain't talking about Jacob and Esau. No, we not even playing those games. We are not playing those games. All right, we're not playing those games. You need to know your Bible, right? We ain't talking about Jacob and Esau. And even still, Jacob and Esau were black. They were black. Okay? They were black. Esau's line, obviously, it was more tainted because they were more nation mixing. But the sons of Jacob's had strict mandates not to marry other people outside of different lands or nations for a reason. And it was for the preservation of that bloodline that needed to be preserved. And, obviously it did get preserved. I mean, the Bible even tells us, right, who it was that that continued the bloodline of Jacob after the 70-year exile in Babylon. But anyways, you said I'm delusional. Israel is not in Africa. It's damn sure not in the Middle East, because there's no such thing as the Middle East. So you're delusional if you believe that Israel is in a notion of the Middle East. Israel is in Africa. It's right next door to Egypt for a reason. All right? Like, y'all want to continue with the white supremacist lies, but you can't do that here. Sorry. Charles is big mad because he done bought into some bullshit all these years. And now here he is just saying shit. Anyway, he doesn't want to hear the truth. Greg, let me tell you, tell the truth and shame the devil is what I say. But these devils don't want to be ashamed because they trying to uphold idealism of supremacy. So, you know how it goes. I'll tell y'all this. I don't read Bible stories, okay? I read Bible accounts, because that's what all of those books in the Bible, these are personal human accounts of what was happening on the earth during their time, how what was happening on earth played into the Bible prophecies that were out there during their time. If you really understand the Bible, you will understand this, right? They talk about the Jews' Exodus, the Exodus of 1948. Man, that was some bullshit, okay? That was some old bullshit. It's not even biblically based at all. There's no biblical basis for it. Because if you want to look at the chronology of the Bible, the Hebrews already had exited or had an exodus back to their land during when the Babylonian Empire fell. And again, the Persians helped them do that with tax breaks. But anyways, they even helped them build that second temple that was destroyed by the Romans, rightfully so. Anyways, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Charles will pray for the apostasy that you have been believing in as a Christian Zionist. What's going on, Howard? I see you. I see you, Howard. How are you doing, my friend? You know, we talking real truth. Y'all not going to be out here starting wars and getting whole nations involved with wars on some bullshit. You have a whole senator talking about the reason why he's enabling or supporting some bullshit is because of some bullshit notion that the Bible don't even addresses. So anyways, y'all, keep your prayers up. Keep your prayers up. The devil is out here deviling. That's all I got to say. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you would not disrespect or abuse yourself, do not disrespect or abuse your neighbor. Bye.